Beulah Tahamont lived during a time when Native peoples in North America faced assimilation policies, loss of land, and boarding schools. Born into a context of resistance and preservation, she was Abenaki and Oneida. Her name appears in records around 1907, when leaders and families were working to keep their language, ceremonies, and ways of making a living under government pressure. In the early 1900s, during the gold rush, Valdez, a port on the Gulf of Alaska, served as a gateway for mining routes and heavy traffic of people and cargo. In 1907, the local photo studio captured the daughter of Chief Nikolai of the Atna people, highlighting Native presence amid the region's rapid economic change. In 1909, a photographer documented members of the Crow Nation in Montana at the Crow Agency. As the administrative center of the reservation, the agency managed supply distribution, enforced federal policies, and handled negotiations with government agents. It was also a place for ceremonies and gatherings that carried on the community's cultural traditions. In 1920, in the city of Lawton, Oklahoma, photographer Bates captured a Comanche mother and her child. Taken during a time of federal assimilation policies, the photo shows members of a southwestern tribe connected to Fort Sill. The portrait stands as a historic record, preserving clothing, posture, and family bonds central to Comanche life. In 1958, Blackfoot woman Joyce McDougall was photographed in the community of Brockett, the headquarters of the Piikani Nation on the Piegan Reserve in southern Alberta, Canada. The photo marks a period when reserves, shaped by federal policies, organized life on the plains. Among the prairie peoples, the Blackfoot maintained their language and rituals despite pressure from schools and religious institutions. In 1923, a photograph taken in Havre, Montana, near the Canadian border, shows Jim Denny of the Cree Nation with his wife Maggie, daughter of Little Bear, and their children William and Florence. The image captures a Native family in the early 20th century, a time when Cree people lived across areas of what are now the United States and Canada. In 1908, the photograph titled "Near the End of a Noble Life" recorded the final years of Chief Louison, a Salish, Flathead leader. The image reflects a time of forced transition, when Native communities in the northwestern United States faced assimilation policies, but continued to preserve their practices, languages, and ties to the land. In the early decades of the 20th century, a photographer in Montana captured the careful preparation of members of the Flathead Nation for a ritual dance. The clothing, instruments, and steps were organized according to ceremonial calendars, showing how sacred dances were passed down across generations and how central they were to social and spiritual life. In 1925, on the Blackfeet Reservation in Montana, Mary Henry Gunn, Mrs. Alec Gardepee, and Mrs. Jane, Pikuni women, were photographed studying reading. The scene reflects literacy efforts tied to assimilation policies and the reservation school, marking the negotiation between Blackfeet oral tradition and the administrative demands of the state. In 1904, at the Louisiana Purchase Exposition in St. Louis, Belle Johnson was present. From the Blackfeet Reservation in Montana, she was of mixed heritage, Pikuni Blackfeet and Swedish. Her presence recorded the meeting of Native and European traditions and highlighted before a national audience the importance of Native representation at major events. At the beginning of the 20th century in Montana, a photograph captured Chief Rocky Boy, a Cree leader, alongside his family. The portrait, made in a time of federal pressures and land disputes, shows household arrangements, gender roles, and authority, revealing how leadership was tied to everyday life in Cree communities of that period. In 1890, an image was taken of Eddie Gray, heir of White Elk, a member of the Northern Cheyenne. The portrait comes from the post-Plains Wars transition period, when the nation, speakers of an Algonquian language and allies of the Lakota, lived under the reservation system. Their ritual practices and social organization shaped trade networks and boundaries in the Upper Missouri. In 1883, a photograph recorded two moons, a prominent Cheyenne leader. Among neighboring peoples were the Apsaluk, known as the Crow, with a strong presence in the northwestern United States. Their collective life relied on rituals, oral transmission, horsemanship, and craftwork, foundations that continue to shape the group's identity. In 1926, Miss Jessie Jim, a member and spokesperson of the Chelan, was photographed on the terrace of the Davenport Hotel in Spokane, Washington. The image places an indigenous woman of the Northwest in the urban setting of the post-World War I era. The Chelan from the Columbia River Valley maintained fishing, seasonal rituals, and trade networks despite pressure from federal policies. Around 1925, an image was taken of Luciania, also called Songbird, and Tessie Mobley, an artist of Euro-American and Chickasaw heritage. The portrait belongs to a moment of native affirmation. The Chickasaw, one of the 5 civilized tribes, originally from the southeastern U.S., preserve languages, clans, and institutions despite the forced relocations of the 19th century. In 1880, a hunter from the Crow Nation was photographed in Montana, capturing a moment of transition on the plains. Hunting, central to both the economy and the ritual calendar, provided food, hides, and prestige. The act also shaped relationships with spirits and territories, linking clan, season, and movement to the landscapes that sustained Crow life. In 1904, in Taos Pueblo, New Mexico, a photograph captured a local craftsman dedicated to making arrows. The image comes from a time of growing contact between ethnographers and native peoples. Taos Pueblo, inhabited continuously for centuries, is one of the oldest Native American settlements in the U.S., preserving techniques, rituals, and language. At the beginning of the 20th century in Montana, a photograph recorded a gathering of members of the Crow Nation, Apsaluk. The scene shows family ties and social networks, visible in postures, clothing, and objects. More than just a portrait, the image documents everyday practices and traditions that shaped community life during that period. In 1926, a photograph captured Alice Gary, a resident of the Coeur d'Alene Reservation in northern Idaho. A descendant of Ignace Hayden Gary and Suzette Josephine Rivet, she was part of a family lineage. The image, taken during a phase of documenting Native peoples, points to the intergenerational transmission of practices and stories that shape Coeur d'Alene history. In 1916, in Comanche County, Oklahoma, a photograph was taken of Powhatan, also known as Margaret Fisher. Born in 1895, she embodies the intersection of German-American and Comanche worlds. Her father, a German taken prisoner and later adopted by the Comanche Nation, defined a family history marked by encounter and cultural mediation. At the beginning of the 20th century, photographer and ethnographer Walter McClintock captured a Blackfeet camp in Montana, with tipis lined up and horses in the background, symbols of mobility and work. The image was part of a series of glass lantern slides, then used in lectures and classes to document Native ways of life under rapid change. In 1879, at the Rosebud Agency, Sioux leaders gathered to evaluate treaties, the pressure from settlers, and relations with federal agents. Among them were Black Crow, a respected advisor; Two Strike, a chief with a history of campaigns; White Thunder, guardian of rituals; Spotted Tail, mediator in negotiations; and Iron Wing, organizer of the villages. They debated paths for the immediate future. In 1901, in the state of Montana, a photograph shows Duncan MacDonald with his wife. A member of the Flathead people, he appears in everyday clothing, with a typical Northwestern setting in the background. The image captures a simple moment, and at the same time documents family relations and ways of life, showing the role of photography in preserving memories and identities. Helen, known by her tribal name Goes Ahead Hogan, was photographed shortly before her death in 1925. A member of the Crow Nation, she lived on the Crow Reservation in southern Montana. The image documents the final stage of her life and highlights the importance of safeguarding Native narratives to ensure their transmission to future generations. In 1906, on the Crow Reservation in southern Montana, a photograph was taken of Hannah Morrison, born in 1882. Daughter of Alva James Morrison, a white man and a Crow woman, she exemplifies interethnic unions within the context of federal assimilation policies. The image became part of collections and stands as a reference to contact between communities in the West.